Hey, HorseCenter fans, you know Matt and I are hot on the Kentucky Derby Trail, but there's no big preps coming this weekend. So what are we going to do, Matt?
Hey, Brian, why don't we look at some horses that we consider Kentucky Derby dark horses? Horses that have shown some potential that we think might have a chance of making the field.
Well, they haven't broken through yet, Matt, but I think there's a few on our list here of Kentucky Derby dark horses that may do more than just make the field. Kentucky Derby dark horses today on HorseCenter. Watch it now. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Schiffman. How are you today, Matt?
I'm good, Brian. I'm ready to talk a little bit more about the Kentucky Derby. We got a couple weeks off before there's another points race.
That's right, Matt. We're in a little slowdown here, a little hiatus, if you will, from the big preps for the Kentucky Derby. So, folks, we're going to talk about some of our favorite Kentucky Derby horses, Matt and I, who we like so far this year, but we're not going to talk about a champion. We're not going to talk about undefeated stakes winners. We're not going to talk about some of the biggest favorites on the latest future poll or the biggest buzz horses from last year, this year, Matt. Instead, we're going to do our own version of the Kentucky Derby dark horses HorseCenter style. Are you ready to roll?
I'm ready.
Let's do it. Matt, this first horse on the list is a horse that I am quickly falling for a little bit, especially as it relates to the Kentucky Derby. I think he's got 10 furlongs written all over him. His name is Country House, and all of a sudden, Hall of Fame trainer Bill Mott looks loaded for this Kentucky Derby.
He sure does, Brian. And, of course, we're talking about Bill Mott, who has never won the Kentucky Derby. So I'm sure there's a lot of excitement in the Mott barn. But we're talking about Country House here, a son of Lookin' It Lucky, who ran a tremendous race down the stretch to finish second in the Risen Star to War of Will, who is now one of the leading Derby candidates, and beat a big field of other horses.
Yeah, Country House, of course, broke onto the scene. Well, I guess he broke onto the scene late last year, Matt, because he ran a very good maiden special weight when running second last fall in New York to Kentucky Wildcat. That was kind of the sign of things to come. That was his second career start for trainer Bill Mott. As you said, he's the son of Lookin' It Lucky. And what he did at Gulfstream Park in January, his third lifetime race, was pretty astounding because he really did. Some horses break bad, but he really got left at the gate in that maiden special weight in January. He was well back. He was 10 lengths back of the field instantly. And then he just rolled in that maiden special weight and won for fun. So he comes into the Risen Star last weekend at Fairgrounds. War of Will, of course, has been, let's face it, he's been the best stakes 3-year-old this year so far. And again, there was trouble. It wasn't at the break this time, but he made a big rally, big, strong-looking horse, made a big rally. Actually looked like he might give War of Will a race, but then he just kept lugging in badly. And he did it more than once, Matt, and that cost him any chance to win. But still, if he can put it all together, I think this horse has a lot of upside.
Yeah, I agree. Coming down the stretch, there were a couple instances there where Country House was clearly gaining, but raced greenly as a still inexperienced horse, and War Will was able to just continue on. But I think the thing to note here particularly is that Country House was fairly close to War Will in there, but then there was a pretty big gap back to the rest of the field, and that's something to take note of.
Yeah, it was a 14-horse field with a lot of Kentucky Derby hopefuls in there. So, yes, very impressive. Obviously, War of Will is one of the main contenders right now for the Kentucky Derby. And if you think that, then you ought to take a look at Country House, because these last two races, his only two races as a 3-year-old, are very impressive. Having said that, he's got issues he needs to get over, maturity in the Bill Mott barn. Hopefully that happens soon. Country House, a major dark horse for me, Matt. Number 2 on the list is a horse I think you've been watching a little bit more than me for a few months now, and he comes out of your neck of the woods there in New York.
Yeah, this is a horse that's trained by Kieran McLaughlin, a Shadwell homebred, Heichel, a son of Daher. I really have been impressed with the way this horse has shown a turn of foot in his closing move. He's shown courage and rallied up the rail in a maiden special weight, going 6 furlongs, and then stretched out to 7 furlongs in the Jimmy Winkfield at Aqueduct also. And again in there, showed a really nice turn of foot coming down the stretch, fought his way up the rail. So I like those things. They're looking, I think, at the Gotham next, which is a logical step for a horse kind of like this. It's still one turn, so Heichel can continue to progress, but there's 50 points on the line here, and it's a way to get your way into the Derby field. Still a lot of questions to answer for this horse, but I like what I've seen.
Yeah, and there is a lot to like here with Heichel, Matt. Kieran McLaughlin obviously has a talented colt in the son of Daher. Daher, of course, was a pretty spectacular winner of the Cigar Mile a little over a decade ago. Now Heichel, what I see I like, because he is really finishing all 3 of his races, even the race he lost in his first race of his career, came back with a maiden win and then the Jimmy Winkfield win. Problem is all 3 were sprinting, and I don't necessarily trust horses that have that explosive finish sprinting to be able to do that explosive kind of finish as you go 9, 10 furlongs. We'll see. I think he's probably better than a lot of people realize, and you notice that quickly on in his career, but I am worried about the distance. Like you said, the Gotham should be next for him, which is a mile 16th, so that'll be a test. The Gotham will probably come up not as one of the best preps out there, but a reasonable enough prep for test for Heichel. So we'll see. Breeding, just like the fact that he's only sprinted so far, worries me just a little bit. In that he's got a famous half brother in Tacklefull, and Tacklefull, of course, was a really good sprinter, but didn't get it done when he was stretched out. So we'll wait and see a little bit with Heichel, but obviously a talented horse in the barn of Kieran McLaughlin. Matt, let's go from New York out to California for the next one. People are already starting to call him California. I would call him Little California Chrome, but he's not little by any means. This son of Uncle Mo is taking kind of the same road that California Chrome took several years ago.
Yeah, it's Jerry Hollander for trainee, son of Uncle Mo, who has 3 wins from 4 career starts, owned by West Point Thoroughbreds, who has been picking out some really nice horses lately. And you said following the path of California Chrome, that means that thus far Galilean has won the King Gloria stake and the California Cup. Those are restricted to California breds, and that's what the great California Chrome did until he stepped out after that to try and gather up Kentucky Derby points. And that's the plan with Galilean also. He's going to have to now face some of these big names, some of those undefeated horses that you have mentioned from California, who are going to be making their 2019 debuts in March.
Yeah, Galilean has been super impressive. Listen, Jerry Hollendorfer is one of the top trainers, if not the top trainer. I put him right up there with Bob Baffert in being able to pick out 2-year-olds of training of just huge potential. He did with his son of Uncle Mo. They spent $600,000 for him last year as a 2-year-old in training. So Hollendorfer obviously saw a lot of talent. You could see that, Matt. And he debuted in stakes races. He's only run in stakes races, 4 of them to be exact. And, they've all been restricted and they've been simpler company. But in the King Glorious late last year and then in the recent Cal Cup Derby, he just was head and shoulders better than the rest of the field. He's doing it with good speed ratings, fast time. So obviously he deserves a chance against the best. Night and day, as far as the competition he's probably going to see. I don't know if they keep him in California. Hollendorfer, West Point have other options to keep out there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with this one. California Chrome, listen, he was special. He was one of a kind to go from races like the King Glorious and the Cal Cup Derby to become a Kentucky Derby and Preakness winner. But Galilean is a real deal as far as talent, and we'll see what he can do against the best soon enough. Uncle Mo, obviously well-liked from Jerry Hollendorfer Barn, so one to keep an eye on is Galilean. Matt, the next horse on our list is also a horse from California, and unlike Galilean, who started his career in a stakes race, Sueno was mired in maiden claiming for the first two starts of his career.
Yeah, and Sueno, as we said last week when we were doing our previews for the Derby prep races, is trained by Keith DeSormo and has taken an interesting path. Back in December, Sueno won the Gold Rush Stakes on that artificial surface at Golden Gate Fields, and also finished second in the Sham. So started to put together a good resume. At that point, DeSormo decided not to go to the El Camino Real and run again on that artificial surface, but to go to Oaklawn and run on the dirt. And he was my pick going into the Southwest Stakes, and ran second in there, beat the rest of the field, but got run down by that big move by the long shot Super Steed in there. I like that Sueno has an interesting option to get to the Kentucky Derby, and that could be for DeSormo to go to the Jeff Ruby Stakes on the artificial surface at Turfway Park. He hasn't confirmed that he's going to do that, but we know the horse loves that surface, could get a softer field.
Yeah, Sueno is interesting. I'm not as big on the Jeff Ruby for him. I'd rather see him continuing on against good top horses. A son of Atrides who probably is not well known, but he was a talented son of Medagliadoro, a young sire, and Sueno looks the part of a nice horse despite being in maiden claiming the first two starts. Since then, he's running 3 stakes races, as you mentioned, Matt, the Gold Rush on the synthetic surface at Golden Gate, and then the two this year, the Sham and the Southwest. He was really running down the lane, second to Gunmetal Gray out there in the Sham, and then second, as you mentioned, Super Steed at Oaklawn Park, bottled up for a bit of the race too. So it was a promising performance again, and it looks like he's moving forward nicely for Keith DeSormo. DeSormo obviously knows how to get horses ready for the classics, having a conditioned exaggerator to a second place in the Kentucky Derby and a Preakness win just a few years ago. Sueno, very interesting. I like the fact that he looks like he wants to go longer, and he looks like he's finishing his races full of run, Matt. But the next horse on our dark horse list here might have had even more of an issue, or more of a bottling up issue, that is in the Southwest Stakes. His name is Long Range Toddy. He's the son of Take Charge Indy for the Steve Asmussen barn. Yeah,
maybe one of the more high profile horses on our dark horse list here, because he's already run in 3 Derby points races. He won the Springboard Mile and was second in the Smarty Jones, and then was third in the Southwest. So he's already accumulated 16 Derby points in there, Brian. Run 6 races, so he's got 3 wins, a second and a third in his career. I think we both appreciate that this son of Take Charge Indy has really shown good courage and good grit in those Derby races, and has fought in all of them to the wire. So I think we both like that. He may return next in the Rebel and stay at Oaklawn Park.
Yeah, and I would argue with you, Matt, just a little bit. I don't think a lot of people are talking about Long Range Toddy at all for the Kentucky Derby. I think he's a horse that's outside everyone's top 10 for the most part.
Oh, yeah.
They look at the Springboard Mile win and the second in the Smarty Jones and the third in the Southwest, and they say, okay, he's a decent horse, but not a Derby horse. And I'm wondering. I like the way he fought to the Springboard Mile win. And then I don't think he had the greatest trip, and he was coming in the Smarty Jones. And then last time, really, if you look at the trip he got, he came from an outside post he got shifted to the rail quick, and then the jockey's kind of pulling him up, trying to keep him off of the leaders who were kind of dueling there in the Southwest. So I don't think that was the easiest thing for him. And then when he wanted to run, he had to wait and to wait and to wait. And then when he did get an opening finally on the rail, he really did run, and he probably was finishing fastest of all, despite Supersteed rallying for the win and Sueno rallying for second. Long Range Toddy was really running down the lane there on the rail after finally getting an opening. So I think he's a horse who looks like he wants a distance, who looks like he's got, like you said, a lot of courage. Looks like he's still on the improve under a trainer who certainly knows how to get good horses ready, Steve Asmussen. Got to root for Willis Horton, the owner and breeder of this one. Good old Willis Horton always has a funny quip or two. So Long Range Toddy, I think he might be better than just looking at his nice races of first in the Springboard, second in the Smarty Jones, and third in the Southwest. All right, Matt. Well, we've been seeing a lot of Long Range Toddy the last few months. We have not been seeing anything of Mucho. Mucho, by the way, Matt, is the second horse from Bill Mott on this list. He's the son of Blame, and we haven't seen him for months and months.
No, and you mentioned waiting when you were talking about Long Range Toddy. Different kind of waiting here for Mucho. Mucho showed a lot of promise as a 2-year-old, and we haven't seen him run since then. We haven't seen him run since he finished second in the Hopeful at Saratoga on closing weekend. He's been working in January and in February. He had a recent 2-week gap in his works just at the beginning of February. I'm not sure if that's something that we need to be concerned about for this horse that is owned by Claiborne Farm and Adele Dilschneider partnership that has produced so many good runners. But one of the points that I'm trying to make here is that the clock is really ticking for Mucho, and Mucho is going to need to get to the track soon if he's going to be another one that Bill Mott can continue on towards the Derby.
Absolutely. And Bill Mott, of course, is not one to rush young horses. So Mucho will not be rushed. But on the other hand, there's a lot to like here. Matt, the son of Blame, who means he probably should be able to get a distance, no problem. Only sprinted last year, but in those 3 races, Belmont, Saratoga, nice Saratoga maiden win, and then a decent rally in the Hopeful to be second. He just looked, kind of oozed the look of a class horse, a horse who's going to get better with age and also more distance. And I've been wanting to see him since the Hopeful. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened. You mentioned that 2-week gap in workouts, and that too worried me. But the good news is his workout of this Monday, the 18th, was another bullet. He's had some bullets lately, so obviously he's doing well, and it looks like he's getting nearer a race. Hopefully it'll happen soon. Hopefully he'll get 2 good preps in and then have a shot at the Derby, or hopefully Mott will say he's just not quite ready and we'll have a really good horse to look forward to after the Kentucky Derby. But Mucho remains a horse to watch. Now, the next horse on our list, Matt, I think is a horse that might be getting a little bit more buzz than some of the others on the list. But he's never run in a stakes race. I'm talking about Global Campaign, son of Curlin, out of an AP Indy mare, trained by Stanley Huff, and a trainer that we've known for a long, long time, Matt, but hasn't had a really good horse for probably a few years. Global Campaign might be a really good horse.
Yeah, and Stanley Huff has taken over the training of some of the Sagamore horses, which Global Campaign is one of them. If Justify hadn't come along, we'd be making a big deal out of the fact that Global Campaign would have been one of those Apollo horses who did not make a start as a 2-year-old, but Justify put that all to bed. Yeah, he has been super impressive in his maiden special weight win, and then recently an allowance win. Both of those happened at Gulfstream Park. I'm guessing that they'll probably look to stay at Gulfstream Park, maybe join the list of super salty field that may come together in the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah, that Fountain of Youth is looking like a good race and should be a real test for Global Campaign among several others. Global Campaign, listen, those races at Gulfstream were no joke. 7 furlong maiden race in January, so he actually started earlier in his career than Justified, for what that's worth. But then that was an eye-catching maiden win. Then he stretched right out to a mile 16th. And not only did he win impressively, Matt, but I think there was a very good horse that was behind him that day, Standard Deviation from the Chad Brown barn. So those two races make me think that Global Campaign, for at least a good measure, is kind of a real deal and a graded stakes kind of horse. Long way to go. He's got the breeding for it. We'll see how he does next time. But Global Campaign, of the horses who've never yet run in a stakes race, is certainly one of the top ones on our list. The next one on our list, Matt, has run in a few stakes races, and his last one at Tampa Bay was just a wow kind of performance. I believe you could say that was a win-win-win for win-win-win.
It certainly was. Michael Trombetta, who is based up at Fair Hills in Maryland, is the trainer of Win Win Win, a son of Hat Trick, a Japanese sire, and it's a homebred from Live Oak Plantation. Is training Win Win Win, and he made his first 3 starts at Laurel. And ran second in a stake there, and then Trombetta sent him to Tampa Bay for the Pasco Stakes, and he went in that 7 furlong. He was fast. He I think broke the stakes record or track record in his performance in the Pasco. I'm a little excited about this horse, Brian. Not necessarily because I think he could win the Kentucky Derby, but I would love to see a speedy horse like this in the Derby again, Brian. The point system has kind of kept these kind of horses from being able to qualify because they have trouble stretching out to the distance that is in the Derby prep races. And that may be the case with Win 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 when he tries the Tampa Bay Derby. But I'm going to be rooting for him because I'd love to see some speed like this back in the Derby.
Yeah, Matt, and you're saying that, and he hasn't really shown a ton of speed other than these fast sprints, of course.
Right.
He's come from off the pace a little bit, so we would suspect that once he stretches out, he's going to be well. If he runs any similar fractions to even coming from off these pace in the sprints, he'll show a lot of speed. Breeding is interesting. Grandson of one of my favorites, Sunday Silence, of course. So there's a good deal of distance pedigree there in his bloodlines. You know, you don't usually see horses on the big horses on the Kentucky Derby Trail who race for the first 3 times at Laurel. He had a little trouble when in his only defeat, ran a good second to probably a good horse in that stakes race at Laurel. And then, you know, like we're saying, the Pasco was just ginormous, the effort there. So I said it about Heichel. I need to say it about Win Win Win. I'm not sure I completely trust horses that are rallying in sprint races to all of a sudden be good distance horses. But this one, I see distance pedigree there, so that's interesting. And he just ran so fast in the Pasco. Obviously, he's got talent. We'll see on Win Win Win. I know some people have really jumped on his bandwagon a little bit. I'm not quite there yet, but as a horse who's never run at a major truck or a graded stakes or a true Kentucky Derby prep, he needs to be on this list after that Pasco win. Next on our list, Matt, is a horse who really is trying to take after Justified, because this one didn't make his career debut until February, like Justify. In fact, he didn't make his career debut until Monday. But the breeding is there, trained by Todd Pletcher, $750,000 2-year-old purchase. Intrepid Heart has caught our attention quickly.
Yeah, it's a son of Tappet, and that was a huge performance at Oaklawn in a maiden special weight, going a mile. So it's always noteworthy when a horse comes out and runs that impressively, going 2 turns, and that's what happened with Intrepid Heart. It's got that Tappet thing going, who has never produced a Derby winner, and this is a tall task now for even Todd Pletcher to get this horse ready. Maybe they'll run him right back at Oaklawn because he's showed that he likes that track.
Yeah, Intrepid Heart. We should mention that he's a half brother to Commissioner, so that's more on that pedigree side. And listen, this maiden special weight was every bit as fast as the horses battling for the win in the Southwest ran the same day. So obviously a good performance in its debut performance. Intrepid Heart, well-bred, big maiden win for Todd Pletcher. Talented horse. He'll graduate to stakes racing very quickly. Maybe the Rebel, we'll see soon where he goes next, but Pletcher looks to have a good one in Intrepid Heart. Finally, Matt, we could have gone on with these dark horses, but we limited it to 10. And I think another horse that people don't really know about yet on a large scale is coming out of Golden Gate Fields, and his name is Another Twist of Fate, and he's a son of, like Justify, he's a son of Scat Daddy.
Yeah, and certainly everybody knows that. That Sons of Scat Daddy are good on all different surfaces. Another Twist of Fate, last 3 wins in a row have all been at Golden Gate Fields. He won the El Camino Real Derby, so he picked up 10 Derby points. And this one is a horse that likes to run on the front end and is speedy. He took the El Camino Real Derby right out of the gate, got sent to the lead all the way around the track, and won that race impressively. His first win of his career was on the dirt at Santa Anita, and that was a 9th place finish. I don't know what we can take from that, Brian. It was his first career race. A lot of horses are not ready to fire in their first career start, so I don't think we can automatically assume that he doesn't like the dirt, considering that he went from there to Golden Gate Fields. But that was, because his trainer is based at Golden Gate. So he will have to, show that he likes the dirt. Again, I don't know. Maybe they'll go to the Jeff Ruby on the artificial surface next and pick up the Derby points that they need, and then try the dirt, or they'll go to the dirt next time.
Yeah, we're talking about the Jeff Ruby Stakes. That's a little earlier this year than it has been in years past. So you certainly can do a Jeff Ruby and then another race before the Kentucky Derby. It's even easier this year with about 8 weeks between the Ruby and the Derby. Another Twist of Fate, yeah, you mentioned he had 1 dirt race at Santa Anita. It wasn't very good. On the other hand, he was really well liked as a 2-year-old in training. Trainer Blaine Wright is high on this one. He was purchased for $360,000 as a 2-year-old in training. And listen, those 3 races at Golden Gate Fields, it reminds me a little bit of a horse who won the Derby years ago named War Emblem. Nobody really was giving War Emblem too much love, but he threw in a couple monster gate to wire victories before the Kentucky Derby, and look what he did. Of course, winning the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. Now the big thing with Another Twist of Fate is, can he take it away from Golden Gate Fields? Can he take it on dirt? Like you mentioned, we don't know. I would like to see him get a dirt race in. Son of Scat Daddy, he might be better on synthetics than dirt. But on the other hand, he certainly is eligible to run on dirt. So those 3 races, a maiden, then an allowance, and then the El Camino Real Derby, were good enough by any measure to take this horse seriously, even though he's coming from a synthetic track and Golden Gate Fields, Another Twist of Fate. All right, folks, we hope you enjoyed this show. This was HorseCenter's Kentucky Derby Dark Horses, Matt. We're inching ever closer. We're going to have just a load of Kentucky Derby preps coming up in March. But for now, we wanted to do something fun while we're waiting for the Kentucky Derby preps to restart again. We're waiting for some of the biggest names to come around or come back again as 3-year-olds. But for now, hopefully this list of 10 horses gave our viewers something to think about, maybe some new names for them as they look forward to the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah, Brian, I think it was fun to do, and I'm sure probably a couple of them, maybe 2 or 3 of them, have a good shot to get into the Derby field. And as always, I want to thank our friend Brett Workman for putting together the show.
Thanks to Brett. Thank you to the viewer for watching. Hey, if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation, go ahead and do that now. Also, we want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. Also, Matt, we have another start coming up. Our filly, hopefully fourth time will be the charm for our Derby Day Racing filly out of Looking at Lucky, Sooner Schooner. She'll be running this weekend at Fairgrounds, so we're excited about that. And Matt, before we go, I think we should take one more look at what went down at Fairgrounds. We talked about Country House. How about the winner, War of Will? We'll let the Fairgrounds announcer there take us away with War of Will's big win in the Risen Star Stakes.
Here's Gunnett with 50 Kentucky Derby points to the winner. It's our last of the day at the Fairgrounds. It's a grade 2 in the gate. And they're off in the 2019 Risen Star Stakes. And there's Chase the Ghost going out toward the lead with Manny Wah, and Dump sped to the lead and angles over. War of Will is also right there. Gets good position for Tyler Gaffalione is the Lecomte winner. War of Will and Gunnett ranging up on the outside now to hit the front as they go to the back of the track. And it's Gunnett took the lead from Dump and War of Will, well situated on the outside. Dump is now third, Manny Wah in fourth, and then comes Mr. Money in fifth, and they have 6 furlongs to go. Frolic Moore is out wide looking to gain. Chase the Ghost held up in behind of Sophomores. Then it's Owendale fanned wide with 5 furlongs to go. Plus Caparfait is next, joined by Henley's Joy, who's also racing out wide. Then comes Lehmanite. The trailers are Country House, along with Hog Creek Hustle. And Royland is 14th in a long-looking last. The quarter was 23.71 seconds. Half mile for Gunnett in 47.36. With Ricardo Santana Jr., it's Gunnett who leads them around the far turn. 3 furlongs to go. Gunnett's the target for War of Will, who's making his move right now with inside 3 furlongs to go. Mr. Money is also close. Dump being ridden to gain. Manny Wah toward the inside, Henley's Joy. Hog Creek Hustle unwinding on the far outside as they come for home at the quarter pole, and it's War of Will who leads them into the fairground stretch. 3/4 in 1 minute 12.20 seconds. It's War of Will coming down to the final furlong, staying on his Country House. Dump had a take up off of heels. Charging on the outside, Hog Creek Hustle. They come inside the final 16th. It's War of Will, chased home by Country House. Past the 16th. It's War of Will. War of Will from Country House. Then Royland. War of Will wows one of them again. Won the Risen Star from Country House. Royland was third. Hog Creek Hustle fourth across from Lehmanite, Manny Wah, then Mr. Money.